Welcome to the Final Girls podcast, where we do not like anyone walking very slowly and methodically towards us. I'm Anna Bogutskaya, co-founder of the Final Girls Collective and your podcast host. If you're new to the show, welcome. We're currently in the last peak millennial stretch of this fourth series of the podcast, where we're looking at teen horror movies in depth and exploring why teenagers, and especially teenage girls, make some of the most compelling protagonists and villains of the genre. We've now reached the moment where there is a noticeable shift in the genre. What some, not me though, have called elevated horror. It's 2014, David Robert Mitchell's It Follows comes out alongside other notable breakout hits in the horror space like Anna Lillian Rapport's A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which we covered in our Vampire series, as well as Jennifer Kent's The Babadook and Leigh Janiak's Honeymoon. There's other breakout hits like Goodnight Mommy and Creep. It was a really exciting time for horror movies. And It Follows drew almost universal acclaim across the board and brought an entirely new energy to the now, at this point in 2014, kind of tried genre of teen horror. Joining me to discuss how exactly it did that is the extraordinary actor and writer Isara Barbara Brown. A quick reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Final Girls UK. We also have a Patreon where you can support our work and get occasional bonus episodes. If you don't want to support us over there, no problem, but I'd so appreciate it if you took a few seconds to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps keeps us in the chart and helps people discover the show. If you're new to this podcast, please keep in mind that we talk spoilers pretty much from the very beginning. So anyone listening to this, I assume you have seen the film. And with all of that said, please enjoy our take on It Follows. So, I have been looking forward to this episode a lot, Isara. Thank you so much for picking this film.
Thanks for having me for this film. I love this film. So this is like, yeah, a real treat.
It's gonna be exciting. It also feels like a turning point in horror and teen horror specifically. So before we start digging into It Follows, remind us what the film is about.
So it starts with, we see this girl like run out of her house in like a nightie. She's obviously scared of something, we don't know what. It's like early morning, her dad, or like early morning, her dad doesn't know what's wrong with her, or it's like late, I don't know what time it is, it doesn't matter. Her dad doesn't know what's going on, and she like runs around her street for a bit, then runs back into her house and runs back out and gets in a car and drives. Then she just sits on a beach and she's obviously waiting for something to come for her again that we can't see. And then the next morning she's like dead on the beach and she's all like bent and like all broken in weird ways. And the whole thing is basically about this thing that we never know exactly what it is, this entity, this being, this thing. It passes from person to person and it follows you slowly but constantly once it's been passed on to you. And the way it's passed on is via having sex with someone. So this is this long chain of people and it just passes person to person and it's always coming for you at the same pace, but always. If it gets to you, it kills you and then it goes back to the person before you. So there's a real need for it to not just pass on, but to pass on to someone who's going to stay alive so that it doesn't come back to you. And it follows the main characters. There's one teen girl, who lives in, I guess it's Detroit, right? Yeah. Like in this, her sister and like two of their friends, who hang out all the time, and she's dating this guy. He seems like a nice guy. It's all going well. Then there's like one date he's acting a bit weird. They sleep together the first time, and then he chloroforms her to give himself time to tie her up and give himself time to explain what's about to happen, that this thing's going to be coming after her, that she needs to stay alive, that she can't let it touch her. He basically lays out the rules of what's going to happen. He's like, don't let it touch you, never go anywhere without 2 exits, without more than 1 exit. It's always coming. It's slow, but it's not stupid. Like all this, he lays out all the things for her in this like very like, where she's like panicking and doesn't really know what's going on. And then the whole thing becomes about her trying to figure out if it's true. And then once she realizes it is, her and her friends basically trying to protect her for as long as they possibly can and trying to find a way out of this situation. So it's like, you know, a nice band of teenagers type film. This little cute gang of teens. But yeah, it's essentially about teenagers doing it. Like that's like literally what's happening. It's like very specifically about like, hey guys, you know how teens have sex? Like here's a scary thing that's attached to that for some reason.
That's like the premise of most teen horror movies. Hey guys, did you know that teenagers sometimes like to have sex? Let's punish them for it.
If they do, they will die.
Yes.
So
but let's extend that they will die bit. Just extend it for 100 minutes.
Yeah. So like, but that's their first fatal mistake, was having sex in the first place. But yeah, it's great, and it's a great premise, and it works. It's really effective. Yeah, great film all around.
So tell me, what is your relationship with the film? Like, when did you first watch it, and how did it change for you upon rewatch?
So I first saw it when I was in the London Film Festival. So when it really first came out. So I was at the...
Oh my God, same!
Oh, so you were probably at the same Q&A with the director and Michael Blythe?
Yeah!
Yes. So,
oh my God, but we're at the same screening. We didn't know each other.
We knew each other. I was there too. So that was my first, and I didn't really... It was when I still worked at a cinema myself, so I just, like, all my friends are working at the London Film Festival, so I was getting free tickets. I kind of wasn't even picking films. I was just getting, like, random free tickets, and I'd be like, yeah, I'll go see whatever. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of by accident. I didn't know anything about it, and I loved it. I really didn't know what to expect, and I absolutely loved it. And you could just feel in the audience, right? Like, the minute it starts, and like, because I think at London Film Festival, a lot of people go into films not really knowing it, or like approaching it the same way they would if they were just going to the cinema on like a Saturday night or something. Mm-hmm. And you could just feel how engaged everyone was. And there's not that many jump scares or even like proper scares in this film, but the ones that did happen really like got a reaction. And I just remember like at the end when the director comes on and he had braces at the time, and he was kind of shy and really sweet, and it was just like, you made this? And it's
always a shy one.
He was just like,
always a shy one.
Here's my little film.
He was like, oh, sorry.
Yeah. And it was fascinating because most of the audience questions were people trying to figure out how to get out of it. They're like, oh, but if you did this, and he'd be like, no, because of this. And they'd be like, and it felt just like this puzzle. Everyone was like, no one's really even asking that many questions about the film. They were just like, but if he did this, wouldn't it be like fine? And he's like, no, because you need that person to blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is amazing because he's made this like impossible situation. Everyone's just like, how would you get out of it? Which is such a good, for a film not to have like a hole in it that's obvious, like, why didn't they just do this? For people to really genuinely be stumped at the end of it. And I think I was thinking about it like the whole way home, and then also was super paranoid the whole way home when anyone was walking anywhere near me. I was like, that's when it really hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, am I being followed? Like, what the fuck? So it was just really good. It just made you think about a lot of things, and just, it looks really great and it sounds really great. And I think there was just a lot of like things to love about it. And I'm really glad I saw it in that way. And I'm really glad I got to see the Q&A with the director and like, yeah, with that audience. It was really, with you specifically, unbeknownst to me, I'm glad I got to see it with you, Anna. But yeah, that's my original.
like a weirdly very similar experience to yours. I mean, obviously we were at the same screening without knowing each other, but I remember I was working at the London Film Festival at the time. It was my first job in London, and it was starry-eyed and kind of didn't really know what to expect. It was my first year in London as well, and Michael Blunt, who programmed that film and who still programs for the London Film Festival, like just essentially just sent me like, oh yeah, go watch this. And like I got a ticket and I went by myself and I had no idea what to expect. I was completely blind as to what to expect. I knew, I think I'd seen David Robert Mitchell's The Myth of the American Sleepover, his previous film, which is not horror at all. I'd seen it like whenever that came out, but I wasn't really thinking about films in that festival release schedule way yet. And I just remember similarly to just being there like, I have no idea what I'm watching. I'm so engaged. None of these, the rules are all there, but they're completely visualized in a different way. This is so far removed from like Scream or anything else that I'd ever seen before in horror. I'm laughing because I can see my cat.
Because you're talking, but I'm also watching Vlad like have a moment. He's not even doing anything; he's just making noise and like just standing there.
He is my it. He is my it. He is following me around everywhere, quietly but annoyingly, slowly, everywhere.
I just love that he's just making this like quite like specific meow noise, but this.
I do just like remember this like this weird intense feeling of the film breaking rules that were kind of implicit to horror films and to horror films with teenagers at the heart of them. And when I've rewatched it a couple times since then, but when I rewatched it for this episode, I was like, shit, this film looks entirely different. It looks like it looks so vast. It looks so big. It almost looks like this weird suburban western where all the shots are so ample, so wide. Everything has a sort of art housey, languid, virgin suicide style feel to it that kind of we're not really used to in horror films, or weren't used to at this point at least. And I just remember, I think, like, in retrospect, even being so surprised. And, like, I can see now, even at that very LFF, I don't know if you saw it at that festival as well, but A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night was also screening, and a Lydia Maypour's film. And I remember kind of, you know, I didn't watch the film in that screening because I was working, but I remember sort of having to see a bit of her Q&A with Michael, too. And it was like, oh, wow, this... like the end, I caught the ending of it and kind of the vibe of the festival, and it was that a lot of people are talking about it, and it really felt like there was something shifting in the horror landscape at that time, in this particular moment, kind of, you know, in 2014.
I don't know. I think honestly, I think there was a moment where horror struggled to understand how to make, especially like a teen horror, or like that's not a slasher, like a more serious teen horror, but that also deals with like the modernity of like mobile phones and being able to travel quite easily and like get away from things quite easily. And I don't know. I think there was like kind of a moment of like, I think in the early 2000s they were kind of like, oh, we embrace it, we make the technology somehow part of like that horrible film where like the phone kills you or whatever the fuck. Like, and it was just like, no, that doesn't really quite work. And so I think, and then there was suddenly this wave of like, some people found a way to do it that felt really new. Like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night just felt like a different perspective. Even like stuff like Let the Right One In is like a perspective change, where it's just like, what if it's not like about finding the cause of this like terrible thing? What if it's about like, I don't know, what if it was about like the people it's happening to, yes, but then sometimes what if the terrible thing isn't that terrible at first glance, or like, I don't know. It was just a more interesting point of view people just started experimenting with, I think. and also what the characters needed to be who are protagonists was also changing. Like, those rules felt like they changed not drastically, but like, it's still, as far as, not necessarily looks-wise, who they were, but definitely personality or character-wise, that felt like it was shifting.
I mean, this is also the time that people, I think because of this film, because of A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, because of Babadook, also the same year. Honeymoon is not a film that many people talk about, but it also came out the same year, which I think is relevant. This was around this time that people started talking about, quote unquote, elevated horror, which is an expression that I hate. Right. But you've kind of mentioned a couple of things, but what do you think makes It Follows feel so new?
I think he's kind of, it obviously is like fairly modern times, but it feels kind of weirdly timeless. Like, and even though, again, it's somewhere quite specific, we know it's set in Detroit, like in the suburbs of Detroit, it feels kind of also not specific. There's nothing in it. There's none of those shots where it's like, here's Detroit. This is where we are. It's also just, which is actually, it's new but kind of not. It's a recycling maybe. That the not feeling the need to explain everything, not feeling the need for huge amounts of exposition felt really refreshing. Like landing us in this place with these characters and letting us catch up to who they are and what was going on in their lives. The way that we're going to talk about that later, I think, more, but the way the parents aren't really around, but in a way that makes it very noticeable in this one, rather than it being this dismissed thing of like, oh, for some reason their parents aren't here. It's like a choice, a really clear choice to half show parents or to show that they're a bit distant, a bit absent, and kind of hint at reasons why, but never fully go into it. Like, and it feels more bleak for that reason. Rather than it being like, obviously in the 80s, it's easy to get away with like, oh, the parents just aren't thinking about the kids. But in modern times, it's a bit hard to explain that away. And I think a lot of the times people just kind of avoid kind of explaining why the parents aren't. Or they make it easy, like, oh, they're at work. And that's the only reason why they're not here. Whereas this makes a more pointed effort to be like, no, the parents are not just not around because they're at work. They are removed like from their children's lives. In a way that means they feel like they're really on their own. Like, you never question the fact that they don't go to them. So, it wouldn't make sense. And I think there are things like that, which again, I feel like films have done before, but it was a new way to look at it or a new way to frame it, at least. And I think, it's quite a bold film in a lot of it. Like the music choices, how some of the like lighting is like really washed out, and like, I don't know, I just think it was a really like kind of striking looking film, and like a lot of the choices felt quite, the fact that it's a film that has like, like 3 instances of like teens having sex in it, that it's never like titillation and never like framed as like the sexy, like, oh yeah, and there's like a sex scene in it. It's just all very like even. Yeah, I think that just made it feel very new. Like I think the same with the films we just talked about, this quiet, like evenness, like the Babadook has it, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night has it, where a lot of the time it's just this kind of like steady thing, and then like suddenly something happens and then it goes steady again. And I really like that. And I think it, pacing wise, even that felt new and felt interesting, that it wasn't like, oh, it starts and it's go, 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 go until the end. It's like, no, it ebbs and flows. There are like peaks and troughs, and which feels more like life. And also just, I don't know, there's like a really beautiful bleakness to like the films we've mentioned. There's just something across them that just feels like inherently, like there's an undercurrent of like sadness, I think, in a lot of them, which I think the instinct, especially for teen horror, is often to make it still kind of upbeat, still kind of fun, like have enough quips in there to keep everyone like entertained, and to make just something quite like, no, it's all kind of sad. Like, even without this horrible thing, like the sad undercurrent, like even if this horror didn't visit them, there's this sad undercurrent running through their whole lives, which I guess like as time's gone on has felt more prevalent to like our actual lives. Like no matter what's happening, there's always this undercurrent of like, just this kind of shit. So I think people respond to that. Like I think I did. I think that's one of the reasons people like have like such an emotional response to it. Like genuinely, they really love this film, and I think that's why.
And one of the things that I think really, struck me at the time, and definitely I've noticed a lot more since, is just how the teenagers feel like teenagers, and perhaps this is the thing that makes this film strike a chord emotionally with audiences, is the fact that these teenagers, you mentioned before that they're like such a cute little group, but they're cute in a sense where they're kind of dumb, but they're not dumb.
Yeah.
But they're very clearly like not 27-year-old film stars who are pretending to be teenagers, but are kind of behaving and talking and living lives and having experiences that don't relate to being a teenager. And at the same, like that beautiful bleakness that you're talking about, it's kind of also in their lives. Like when we meet them, they're sort of very languid, they're sort of lounging around. They're not really doing much. And it's not saying it in a judgmental way. It's like, no, that's actually what, a lot of teenagers do. Not everybody's like running around and competing, I don't know, in like varsity sports and things like that. They're not kind of necessarily aimless, but their lives are not massively eventful. Right. So I'm kind of wondering what do you make about the teenagers of the film? And I guess specifically Jay, who's Micah Monroe's character, who's the protagonist, who like gets cursed or infected with it, and then kind of has to carry the curse of her kind of propels everyone to sort of follow her and try to protect her and try to solve this thing or kill this thing.
So I think you're right about the teens. Like we've talked about this in Battle Royale, how it makes a huge difference when teens look like teens, because it suddenly makes everything that's happening to them more horrifying because they're not muscle bound like 27-year-olds. Where you're like, well, they're probably going to be fine, whatever. Like, I don't know. And like any stupid decision they do make, it makes more sense to you because you're like, well, yeah, they're thinking, it's not even like a dumb decision, like, oh, I just haven't done this thing. It's like, no, they're just thinking like teenagers and they just don't know what to do. So they're just taking it like moment by moment. And I like that they're like, yeah, like you said, these languid, just hanging out. It's the summer, I guess. Like, no, because she goes back to school. So maybe, I don't know, but they have a lot of free time.
It feels like fall,
right?
In a way.
So yeah,
maybe
because school's still in. So I'm like, but they don't seem to be. But anyway, they are just hanging. And usually what you have is the teenagers who are like at school and very involved with school and going to pep rallies and doing all that shit. And then the ones who are always just hanging out somewhere, like the bad teens, or they just don't care about anything. And I like that they don't fit into any camp. They're just regular teens who just like sitting around not doing very much. And even the fact it's not a big deal that they drink a little bit and smoke a little bit, it's like, yeah, because that's what teens are doing. Like, they're sneaking things, and then it doesn't have to be this big like, oh my god, this is something we do because we're like bad it's like, no, pretty much like most teens like at some point are experimenting with these things. And even the fact that sex is introduced, like, it's like, yeah, that's when you're thinking about it a lot. Like you're full of hormones, and of course, I don't know. So I do like that about them. And Jay in particular, I love her because she's like that. Like, there's one bit when who says to her sister, like, I wish Jay wasn't so pretty. And her sister's like, yeah, me too. Yeah. And I love that she's at kind of like this small town, like pretty, like, I mean, the actress is like very pretty, but like the way that she's dressed is like that very much like, oh, the pretty girl who lives on our street. She's like that one girl. And like there's a bit where like little boys are watching her like in the swimming pool in the back of her house and stuff like that. Like she's that girl. But even then, it's still in context. It's not like she's that girl. She walks around like flipping her hair in slow motion. She's like regular girl. Just that everyone else has decided that she's like the fittest girl on the street.
It really reminded me like the way that that's framed, and I sort of mentioned it before, but like as you were talking, it made me think about it even more of the virgin suicides, you know, like the Lisbon sisters, where it's like, oh, the neighborhood boys have decided, or like someone has decided you are the prettiest girls that have ever lived.
Right.
And it's like, they're just regular girls.
Right. And
they're
like,
just regular girls.
The myth that revolves around like that person and stuff. And even the next door neighbor, who is like very much like that guy who lives on your street, who you think he's fit because he lives on your street. Like, and he has a car and he's a bit older. Like, it's all these circumstantial reasons that like, it feels like a big deal to them rather than it need to be a big deal to us. It's like, no, I get that this is their world. This is like the people that are in it. But I love them. I love that they have that teenage bond of like, even though they're not sure they believe her for like a little bit of the film, that they trust that they trust what they see, which is that she's really scared and something's wrong, right? So they go along with her because rather than like, which again in horror films is a really, I hate annoying trope especially when it's a woman being like, something weird's happening in our house and the husband's like, I'm sure you're just very tired. Or like just everyone dismisses it, especially if it's a woman saying these things. And the fact that her friends are like, we're not sure what's happening. We're not sure if you're hallucinating or whatever. But the fact that they know that she needs them. And so they just kind of go along with what she thinks will help is, I love, because I feel like that's what you would do for your friends. Like, you're reacting to what you're seeing there. You're not like logicking like an adult would. You're going, this is, and like part of you would be going, well, maybe it is true. And I think because you're younger, there's space in your like mind or whatever to be like, well, maybe this is a thing. Maybe this could be true because look at how she's reacting, and you don't feel the need to like logic it away. So I love that about it, that they don't massively question her. They just know something's wrong and they just want to help her.
I think it's that teenage part as well, like that part of they don't necessarily understand, and she clearly doesn't understand it either, but they can see the effect that it's having on her, just how terrified she is since this thing happened. And they believe her fear. Even if they don't necessarily believe in it, they believe in their friend being terrified.
You know someone and you've never seen them like that you mean? Like, and it's really scary to see someone you know so well be that terrified of something that you can't identify or understand. It's like, that would terrify you. It'll be like, oh my God, like, you know, it would really like unnerve you, and it does. And I like that. And I also like her like arc in the film, like rather than her becoming some like boss bitch, like badass, like chick, it's like, no, she goes into herself. Like after the first thing that happens to her, which is the guy she like really liked and like slept with, and then he chloroforms her, ties to a chair, tells her something's after her. And like, it's like, I'm glad they involve this like police interview again, where you only see like the policeman from the leg down, but where they're asking her, was the sex consensual? And she's like, yes. And it's like an assault happened without an assault happening. And it's a really hard thing. Like it's obviously traumatizing, but like you just realize in that moment, it's like really hard to explain to a police officer that you were assaulted, but not assaulted. Like, and this is a traumatizing situation because it was someone I clearly trusted. No, they didn't hurt me. No, they didn't do anything violent to me. Yes, they took me home. Yes, the sex is consensual, but I am traumatized, like, by what's happened. And, she changes. She's a different person from that moment on. And then every new revelation or everything, every time it gets close to her, or the more she's like really, and then even when she's passed it on, right? She passes it on to the neighbor boy, Greg, who is more than happy to oblige. He's like, yeah, I'll do it. It's great. Even then she goes in, she's in her room. She's literally like, she doesn't want to leave her room. She doesn't want to do anything. She doesn't want to like, and then there's a really beautiful scene where after Greg dies, where she's just, all her clothes are everywhere and she's just literally holed up with a chair against the door, like in her room, and doesn't want to leave. It's like, yeah, even if you think you've done it somehow, like she's fundamentally like changed as a person. And even like at the end of it, like even though it's like arguably like kind of a weird happy ending, she is jaded. she's like changed forever. And I like that they're kind of these jaded teens. I like that their friend is reading The Idiot on her little like amazing shell like e-reader. Like they're just these kind of like cool but don't know they're cool, like smart but don't know they're smart, like super jaded because of stuff that's happened in their real life, like teens. And this just, maybe Jay was like kind of slightly living above it because of the place she holds in society, and now she's just like down, like she's with all of them, like she's just as like jaded as all of them. And I really like that about her. Yeah, I think it's a really great performance. I think she does really well.
She's really touching. Like, I think in those, there's so many close-ups of her face in the film, which really resonate because like she's got such an expressive face. Like she really shifts, I think, from being kind of languid, kind of distant, kind of living in her pretty bubble and being seen from the outside to us being so up close to her being terrified. And because we're seeing as an audience the things that she's seeing, we're seeing it. Even when nobody else is seeing it, we're kind of by her side. Like we can see the monster approach. We can see it when she sees it. And it's terrifying. Like the way, you know, we'll talk a bit more about it, in a minute, but the way it shapes the way that there's a moment where she can't tell if it's actually Greg sleepwalking or if it's it going to kill Greg. Like the fact that she knows that she's the only one who can see it. It's so isolating and so terrifying, and kind of the way that, you know, we're so up close to her face, and it's so sad. Like she's like a teenage girl who can't really communicate what's going on with her or make it stop, and nobody else can make it stop either. So she's so alone, even when she's like holed up in her house, or even when she's with her friends, she's still kind of off into a distance, kind of not really entirely present. And it's really, you really feel it when you're so up close to a performance like that, I think. And it's really rare that I think we get to spend so much time with an actor's face in a film that's like a teen horror film. Well, like you usually kind of, okay, what's the next violent scene? What's the next chit-chatty scene? What's the scene that's going to make us relax? We don't relax at all. And it follows. Like from the moment she gets it, it's like, it's tension all the time.
Yeah. Because even if you're like a scene where nothing particular is happening, it's like, you know, at this point, you know, at some point, this thing is going to turn up. It is still coming towards you. And like knowing that as an audience member, like, shit, like it's relentless. Like you're just like, oh my God, it's coming. Like it's literally always coming. Like, and this moment it can only ever last so long, because at some point this thing is going to turn up. This like calm that we apparently are experiencing is only going to last so long, because at any given moment, like it's going to be ruined. And I think she does a really good job of playing, because it's a really hard thing to play. Like the more I think about it, because it's constant for her as well, but she's just trying to like, she's navigating it different ways at different points, I guess. Like, and it's just, it's really good. Really good.
Like, I'm thinking specifically of that moment on the beach, you know, which is the moment where her friends actually like fully believe her, because they get to see something supernatural happen. But like, I remember watching it, and like you first see it coming in the shape of another teenager, really. And you don't think about it twice. And then suddenly the shot doesn't really change, and the person just keeps on walking towards them. You don't really think about it until suddenly you clock that it must be it. So I'm wondering kind of, what do you think about it? What makes it so scary for you?
I think it's that thing. I mean, it's kind of the same premise as like, in a different way, of like a Mike Myers character or something. Those killers that are never running after you. They never seem to be doing very much work to get you, but they will always turn up. They will always find you. And even if you're running full pelt and they're walking, somehow they will get there. And the idea of this is so scary, because obviously it's not like, I guess Mike Myers is kind of supernatural at this point, but like, this is like full supernatural, right? So it's not like it was ever, we don't actually know what it is, but it's not a person, right? It's something else. It's an entity of some kind. And it's like that idea of like, if you got on a plane and like flew away to like the other side of the world, yeah, you'd be fine for a while probably, but at some point, this thing is going to turn up. And also the idea that yes, you can pass it on, but you have to pass it on to someone who wants to stay alive, right? Because it's no point, because one of the questions I remember in the audience was like, well, you couldn't just sleep with like a prostitute. It's like, to what end? Like, if you don't tell her, and so she doesn't fight to stay alive. So yes, you might sleep with the next person in quite quick succession, but then is he going to sleep with someone else? Like, quickly enough? Is it going to pass on quickly enough for you to give you actual time? And if no one knows, they're not actually looking out for this thing. So it's like, there's no easy...
It becomes the same equivalent of like going somewhere far away. It will buy you time, but actually those people will fall like very, very quickly because they don't know what they're against.
For the rest of your life, and you just imagine this chain of people who have, maybe some of them have lived very long lives and always been like looking over their shoulder in case this thing comes back to them. And I'm like, that's a really terrifying, like, impossible foe. No one knows how to kill it. Like, they've shot it, they've hit it, and it's like, maybe there is a way to kill it, but no one knows how. You can't talk to it. There's no, like, research you can do on it. It's just this thing that's happening. And I think that, and the fact that it can look like anybody just means that, you know, if you're in a busy place, how do you know which one's a stranger, who's the weird one, who's walking directly towards you, who's just not like a regular person? If it's a family member, how do you know, like, it's not actually your sister or brother or mum or dad or whatever? And sometimes they're weirder, and I think it almost feels like it toys with her. Like, sometimes they're so weird, it's like, this can only be to freak her out. Like, when it's a naked person, it's like, well, there's no chance she thinks that's normal, like, in the middle of this, like, place that this naked person's walking towards her. So it feels like, and even the first one she sees, like, besides the one that he shows her, the one that breaks into her house, which is a girl who looks really horrifying and is like wetting herself. Yes. And it's like, that's clearly to really fucking scare her, because what else would this be for?
Or like when there's a naked man on her roof. Yeah. Like just standing on her roof instead of moving.
Right.
That one I remember thinking, like, what is the point of that? You're not even, like, what do you do? How did you get on the roof? Like, what are you doing on the rooftop? That's not how you catch her.
Because, and so it's like, and it's also that thing of like, it's interesting because it does have very specific rules, and I do like that they are laid out at the very beginning. So, you know, like, but it also is bound by human things. So, like, it can't, like, just pass through a door, for example. It has to, like, open the door. The door has to be open, or, like, it can't do anything like that. It has to smash a window to get in and stuff like that. So stuff like that's kind of comforting, because, like, you just pass through something and suddenly be in somewhere with you. But also, like, yeah, the roof stuff, it's like, well, then did it, like, climb up on the roof? Like...
For what purpose?
And it's like, so that's what I mean. It feels like sometimes just toying with her. Like, it just wants to freak you out. It's just toying. Like, even the bit where, like, when Greg kills, it's his mum. And there's a weird sexual element to all of it, right? When there's quite a lot of, like, it's often quite nude, or like some body part showing, or there's some weird, and obviously when when it is Greg's mum, like the actual act of what it's doing to kill Greg looks like weird dry humping, like weird terrifying dry humping, but like also it's like knocking on the door as his mum, rather than even trying to open it. So again, it feels like a weird toying with, a weird, like, fucked up, like, I don't know, and the fact that you can still see it even when it's past you, when you've passed it on, you can still see it. Again, feels like a constant, like, fuck you. Like, it feels like it wants to be in your head more than anything all the time, which is fascinating, because, like, psychological as well. It's like doing like mind games with you, for some reason, as well as being this terrifying thing that's always coming and wants to kill you.
Which one did you find most terrifying?
The tall man at the bedroom door. He's just too tall. Like, and it's just like, the fact that he like does that stoop to, and I was like, that's one the first moment I was truly like, like that really scared me. And the kid as well, like who crawls at the beach. But like, they're all kind of, the minute you clock it, you're like, oh, they just become scary because you're like, oh my God, they're just walking in this weird straight line directly for me. And there's nothing I can do about it. Yeah, it's a really effective, like, scary thing.
It's also weird that it can be so, and I think this is like the greatest compliment to pay to this film, is that it's so scary when we actually get only literally 2 instances of it being actually violent, like when it actually gets to grab. Well, maybe 3 if you consider like the last scene in the pool and stuff as like being quite full on. But we see the kind of the creature, it grab her hair, and then like half of that scene it's invisible, so we see it kind of from everybody else's point of view. And then we see Greg's mom kind of do that weird alien-esque kind of dry humping thing, and Greg is just dead almost instantly. That feels very intense and weird. But like, other than that, it's just it walking, or sort of trying to grab someone, but we barely see it do anything actually explicitly violent, and it's still so terrifying despite the fact that it's not really doing much. So I'm kind of wondering, what do you think, outside of the fact that it's really slow moving, and I personally find that really much creepier than someone like running. Like someone just like, relentlessly, consistently walking towards you is horrifying. But what do you think, kind of, you talked a little bit about the Q&A with David Robert Mitchell, but what do you think about the transmission of it and like these rules that the film set out that do seem pretty, even though they're very simple, seem very ironclad?
It's interesting, because the rules are kind of a mix of, this is what it's doing. It's walking towards you all the time. Don't let it touch you. It's never going to stop. It's moving slowly, but always moving. And then there's the other rules that are like, never be somewhere that only has one exit. Then there are rules for like just existing with this thing following you. Pass it on as soon as you can. Make sure you tell the person, you know, that.
Yeah, like survivor rules.
Yeah. And, they are, but then it doesn't go into detail about exactly, we know it's passing through sex, but there's like quite, it's interesting because at the time, I don't remember anyone asking about this, but it's like, is it only penetrative sex? Is it, because like, you know, are queer kids just safe? Like, because fantastic. But like, and is it unprotected sex, or does it matter? Like, there's certain things that we don't know necessarily. And sometimes it seems to take longer. So sometimes it's like, is it really always? Because sometimes they don't move very far, and it seems to take a long time for it to get to them. Like, for example, when she passes it on to Greg, and Greg's just going about his normal days, right?
For days.
Yeah.
For days.
And so it's like, is it just like giving him that space so he relaxes? Because he doesn't really believe her, so he is going to relax. Whereas with Jay, there's no point in like giving that space because she's already terrified and does believe it because he showed her. So yeah, it's really interesting because there's also things that operate in a system that we don't know about. And you feel like you're hearing the rules that's obviously been passed on from person to person from what they know, which isn't everything. It feels like how it would, if it really happened, how it would really be. It's like, these are the things we know, which is like, we don't have any more information. We don't know if certain other types of sex are fine, if like, it's just very specific things that you're like, these are things that people have learned probably the hard way, like that these are the rules, which is amazing because it still leaves questions that aren't plot holes, which feel like there could be answers to. It's just that there's no reason for anyone in this film to know what they are. So it's fascinating for that reason. Like, it's just really clever. And it kind of, I think you mentioned, like, I mean, I think we're going to talk about it in a bit, but like, one of his influences, you know, is Wes Craven. And you think about films like Scream and like laying out these rules is like a really, I don't know, it's just a really nice way to set up a story to be like, these are the rules and then we're going to break some, or like, these are the parameters of this story. And I guess it's like, obviously like in Scream, it's like very meta and stuff, but this seems more like, more like scarce and pulled back.
But then also there's also like the logic or the dream logic of Nightmare on Elm Street, right? Which is also Wes Craven, which is like, yeah, these are the rules that don't necessarily conform to our understanding of reality, but they need to make sense in the story world. Yeah. That's the only world that they need to make sense in.
Yeah.
And as long as it makes sense there, then that tracks.
Yeah. And it's clever because he's done it so we learn the rules the same time our protagonist Jay learns them, and in the same hurried, frantic way that she learns them. And we only find out more information at the same time she does when she finds Jeff and he explains a bit more and stuff. But it's not over-explained. It's really pulled back. He's really like, these are the few parameters you actually need to know, and I'm not going to explain anything else. Which makes it more terrifying, because it's like, if this happened to you, like you wouldn't have all this information. Like, something becomes less scary the minute you know it's from here, it's this thing, and this is what it, and it's just like, not knowing is what makes it so terrifying. And I think in the Q&A, I remember him saying, I remember Michael asking him, where did this idea come from? And he said he has a recurring nightmare where something is always walking after him. Someone's walking after him and he can't get away. Even if he's running all the time, he can't ever get away. It's always coming after him. It's like a recurring nightmare he has, which when he described it, it was like, oh my God, what? Like, it was really scary. And it's like, yeah, it's a really good premise for a film. Like, that is a horrifying thought. That's the most horrifying. Even if it was a regular human, that's quite a horrifying thought, that someone is always coming towards you, like, to do you harm. Even if they were just a person, even that person was like just trying to find you all the time. And that feeling of always having to be on the run, even if you felt you were safe for like brief moments of time, really you're always, always, always forever on the run, is like, yeah, it's so scary. And I think I think it's the same reason I find like zombies to be the scariest of like horror movie like baddies, because I'm like, it's not even, there's no like even malice in it. There's no like even impetus in the way of like, there's no, it's not like I've got a vendetta, I want to have you for this specific, it's like, no, they just have one focus, that is to like eat you. That's it. That's their only driving force. And if they're especially, I don't like fast zombies because I feel like everyone will be dead in like 5 seconds if they're fast zombies. But like slow zombies, are like the idea that these things are constantly just going to have this one idea and then we'll just keep going towards that goal regardless of like anything. Like, even if they're half a body, even if they're like falling apart.
Zombies are a monument to perseverance.
Yeah. And then like
they have a goal and they will not stop.
Exactly. And like, there's no logic, there's nothing. Just this one. I was like, imagine how powerful, if you had one goal and you just constantly were walking towards it, like you'd be, it's a very scary thought to like be like that. And I'm just like, that's a scary thing to me. Like, to have something have one, don't have any other want or need. It's not even to get anywhere else. Once they eat you, they want to eat somebody else. Like, it's going to be constant and relentless. And I think this kind of scares me for that reason. And I'm just like, fuck.
And let's talk a little bit about the idea of sex in this film. Because it has been, I think, a lot of people have interpreted it as straight up as like, oh, this is a metaphor for STDs. First of all, I guess, do you agree with that reading? And kind of, do you think that it shows sex as a sort of a curse?
See, I feel like I don't think it's just sex, because very different types of sex happens in the film, you know, and they all have different things happen. I think it's more about trusting who you have sex with. I don't know. That's what it feels like to me. Like, she's dating the first guy and he says he's this guy and she doesn't ask too many questions. She fully, like, the bit when he actually chloroforms, so she's fully laying down. She's not watching what he's doing. He's in his boot for some reason. She's not looking at him. She's not paying attention to her surroundings or anything that's happening because her guard is fully down. And he even climbs into the back of her. He starts kissing the back of her neck. All seems on, and then it's chloroform over. And suddenly her world changes, like, in the next, like, however long. And then the next guy is Greg, she's known for a long time, but, you know, the sex definitely is just a function to hopefully pass it on, because at this point she's really scared. And so maybe this is the best choice, and he's willing, because he wants to have sex with her, he's willing, and he doesn't believe this is happening. Is why he's willing, not out of any kind of bravery or, like, anything. And, she kind of, during the sex, she kind of dissociates. It's a bit, she's just looking out the door. She just kind of isn't even in it. And you realize the last time she had sex with this awful thing happened to her. And she's not engaged in this at all. This is just a means to an end. So again, like, it's again very different sex. And the sex for her the first time was satisfying at the time it was happening because it was someone she liked, but she made the mistake in trusting. And then this guy is someone she trusts, kind of, but has made a mistake in the sense of, like, he doesn't really believe her and his intentions aren't good. And then when she has sex with her friend, what's his name?
Paul.
Adorable little Paul. But even when he talks to her about it and he's like, the bit where after Greg dies and she's holed up in her room, like, obviously spiraling, and he comes in and sits with her and he says a really weird thing. I love that it's in there, but it's a really weird thing to say at the moment. He's like, you know, I like you too. And it's like, she has sex with Greg because he likes her. And she says, like, I thought he wasn't scared. That's why it's like, you understand why she's doing this. Like, she's trying to pass it on to someone who thinks, and, like, the fact that he didn't have it in his mind, like, you're closer to her, actually. It'll be scary for her to lose you than it would be she doesn't want to lose Greg either, but it's actually a worse thought to pass it on to you, who she really cares about, and potentially lose you. And the fact that he saw it as, like, oh, you slept with Greg instead of me. And it's, like, such an interesting...
Well, I think that's one of my favorite things about, like, Paul.
Yeah.
Because in any other movie that paid attention less to the characters, he'd be Randy. He'd be, you know, that sort of quote unquote friend zone character who was just pretending to be her friend in order to hopefully one day, if he puts in his time and bides his time, he will get to fuck his friend. But, you know, and they do end up together, and I thought the ending was really sweet because they were still being pursued by it, but they were together and they were still, you know, they were kind of, I guess, both sharing the burden. Yeah. And I think that's what ultimately makes her a little bit more relaxed, is the fact that she still has this burden. She's still afraid. Right. But she can share it with someone. And Paul is kind of willing to take that on for her. I think with her.
That's what I mean.
With her, not for her.
It's not the sex. It's the person she's... So it doesn't feel like, oh, the sex is a scary thing. It's like, okay, so if something bad did happen, like, it's who the choices you make after that. So it's more, I feel like it's less about, like, oh, you should have sex or you might get an STD, and more about you should be careful who you have sex with. And then if something does happen to you, you should then make better choices about who you trust with that information and who you trust to, like, share that part of yourself with. Because with Paul, again, it does feel a bit like they're doing it because he's willing to share that burden with her. But he sticks around. He's there for her. He believes her. He has also tried in many other ways to help her, like, genuinely. And, you know, even though he's been hanging around hoping he can get with her at some point, he does care about her. He's been in her life for a long time. He's willing, I think the big thing is that he believes her. And so is doing it knowing he's putting himself at risk. He doesn't, like, Greg doesn't believe her. He doesn't believe he's in any way at risk anyway. Whereas Greg knows for sure he's putting himself at risk and still wants to. And I think that's the shift why she sees him differently, is that after the Paul scene, after everything that happens, when there's absolutely no denying that this thing is going after her and this is what's going to happen, he still wants to do it. It becomes, so you realize it becomes less about him being like, oh, I just want to have sex with you because I fancied you this whole time, and really more about caring for her. And actually, even though he is the friend zone guy who's always been trying to get, it's like he does care about her. He is willing to be there at the worst point in her life. Like, he wants to stick around. He wants to be part of it. And he's willing to share the burden of what sex comes with, in this instance. So I feel like it's less of like a, you shouldn't have sex, and maybe more of a, I genuinely don't think like, David had a message in there about like teen sex at all. I think he thought it was a fun way for it to be transmitted. I don't think there was any kind of moral like message in there, but I think if you were looking for one, I think it's definitely not about having sex. Like, I'm sure like lots of other teens are not having sex and this isn't happening. It's more about like the type of sex you're having and who you're having it with and who you trust in those situations. Because the three types of, like the three scenes where you actually see her having sex are like very different and, for very different reasons, and she's a different person at each stage of that happening. So I think it's more that like this journey of like how it can change you and who you share it with is what I get from it.
I think you're absolutely right, and in the sense where I can also see how this film can be interpreted and kind of, you know, oh, sex is a curse, it's a negative, you shouldn't have it, which makes it a sort of like a, God, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like a weird optical illusion type of film, where if you look at it one way, you can 100% see one particular statement, and then if you look at it in another way, then it becomes something entirely different. And I see it very similarly to you, where it's like, I think the way that sex is presented in this film is very organically teenagey. I think it's really interesting that we see them talk about sex a lot, in a weird, awkward, kind of cutesy way. You mentioned before, and I completely agree, none of it is titillating. Even the way that the teenagers are like filmed, you know, in their bathing suits or like swimming or just messing around, whatever. It's all awkward and cutesy and under the covers, and it's not, you know, it doesn't feel like a Hollywood movie that's trying to show us, you know, adult actors pretending to be teenagers in that sort of porny kind of way. It's sort of like, no, these teenagers like wear high-waisted cotton underpants and they're kind of weird, and they're just gonna sit around awkwardly all covered up in their mom's old bed sheets after they have sex, because that's what happens. It's not Billy Loomis and Sidney Prescott all the time. That's only in the movies. And I found that so adorable and sweet, and kind of the only downtime that the film actually lets us off thinking about it is actually when some of them are having sex, except in the second part when she has sex with Greg, because all she's doing is looking at the door and thinking about it and thinking, is it going to walk through the door right now? What's going to happen? Have I let my guard down and now it's going to come after me? But I do find it, like the way that it's filmed, both kind of those intimate scenes and the intimate scenes of them just hanging out together as well. I think of those as intimate scenes, but also the way that like the entire film is filmed really interesting. Like the way it's like this town is not particularly fascinating.
No.
It's just suburbia. It's really boring. It's really bland. None of it is like particularly beautiful to look at, but the film obviously makes it beautiful. So I'm wondering kind of, what do you make of the way that the film is actually shot, and especially those very, very brief like 2 or 3 that we get of kind of intense, not even violence, just like terror, I guess is the better word for it, because it's attacking the teenagers.
I think it's shot really beautifully. Like, they have lots of really beautiful shots of hands, like especially Jay's hands.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
There's like the beginning when she's lying in the car playing with a flower, then when she's passed out next to the flower, there's a bit where her and Paul, when her arms in a cast and her and Paul's hands are really close to each other in that moment. Even like Greg's hand when Paul's watching through the like hospital door and Greg's got his hand on her knee. And you can just, I don't know, there's all these like little subtle like moments that they capture really well. And even the bit, like, you're right, this place that isn't particularly interesting or beautiful, like, from an outside perspective, like, even when they're at the parking garage, the way that's lit and shot when he has her tied to a chair is so gorgeous. And I'm just like, this is, like, so well done. Like, in her bedroom, she has like beautiful, like, peach lamp at the side of her mirror. It makes you feel, like, dream-like. And she wears, like, peach a lot. And it just really implies a lot with just light. And lots of the scenes are quite like I said, they're quite washed out or quite stark. And when the violence is happening, it doesn't suddenly cut to loads of like heightened music and like quick cuts. It kind of keeps it like, no, here's this like especially the one in the pool. It's like, here's this pool, and they're making a lot of noise, and because they're panicking and they're trying to say where it is and what everything. But actually, it's still just kind of like, no, it's a pool, and it still feels like a pool. It doesn't feel like, oh no, there's suddenly like all this stuff happening. It's just like this annoyingly like frustrating situation where only she can see where it is. She's trying to point where it is. They can't see it. They're trying to hit it or shoot it or whatever. And it's throwing stuff in the pool. So there's a lot of stuff happening, but they don't make it like faster. It's like the thing's obviously throwing the stuff into the pool in a really considered way because he's trying to actually hit her. And, you know, it takes a while. And even when it pulls her back under and there's not a huge amount of like very bold color. So like stuff like her red nails are really striking in it. And when there's blood in the pool, that's really striking because you actually don't get that big pop of color like in many scenes. Everything's quite muted.
Because even the mangled body of the teenage girl from the very first start, from the first scene, she's pretty like, we see her as almost like a still photograph, sort of completely, you know, torn to shreds. But there's hardly any blood. It's very muted as well.
And the same, so color only really actually red gets used in a very specific way. Like when the first girls at the beach at the very beginning, when she's waiting for the thing to come get it, it's just red headlights that she's in, I believe, or there's like a red glow in the forest, like where it's very specific scene where he's gone like, where he's just gone and some color, and they're really striking every time they happen. They're really considered and really well done, and they come in at really good points. And I think, I'm glad it never kind of gets that frantic. It's frantic because of what's happening, but they're never doing too much and make us feel like, oh, it's more frantic than it needs to be. It's like, no, it's scary enough that there's all this activity happening and we're just watching it from kind of a distance space and like watching it happen, and it happens quite slowly. Like even when you realize on the beach, for example, when you realize that her friend who's walking towards her is actually the real one's in the water and the one walking towards her is it takes a long time after that realization. It still takes it doesn't, even if you're in sight and it realizes it's gone undetected, it doesn't speed up. It still comes at that pace. And the fact that it's like the back of her hair going up, I'm like, I like the slow, and everyone being like, what? And the slow realization, and then them trying to fight something they can't see and her shooting, and then just being like, what are you doing? Like the confusion in those scenes, their confusion is enough. We don't need like to make it seem more like it's enough. Like them running at the pace they're running, them hiding when they're hiding, her trying to get away, her driving like into a thing, but it all in real time is like plenty. So I think it's really like smart that he trusted that he didn't need to do more to make it feel urgent and scary. It's like, no, their reactions to this is enough. Like us watching them be panicked is actually enough.
And we've spoken a little bit about kind of Wes Craven, but I definitely also feel a lot of John Carpenter, especially in the way that he shot Halloween, the first one, and a lot in the music, which you mentioned before. Kind of, did you get bits of Carpenter as well when you were watching this?
Yeah, and I kind of like, in the kind of also bleak, there's no way out of this situation.
Okay.
Like, way. I was just like, yeah, this is just, they're just doing their best, like, in this, like, kind of fuck situation. But yeah, the music and the not afraid of the quiet reminds me of, like, Carpenter, and then having, like, quite this distinct music come in at points. But also not being afraid of, like, scenes that are boring, which aren't actually boring. Like, that reminds me of Carpenter. Yeah, I think it's one of those things, it's one of those films that feels, sometimes when people are like, oh, it's an ode to this director because I really love their work, but it just feels like they've just cut and pasted things. This genuinely feels like an ode. It's like, oh, you can tell that you really appreciate the work they've made, but you also understand that you want to make it your own, or that you want to do something slightly different with it. But that's at the base of it. That's your influence. And it feels like
it's like internalizing what made those directors that they love actually work.
Right.
That's not just the superficial stylistic choices. It's like, yeah, you can use anyone, a lot of people can create the synthy music that sort of has a John Carpenter vibe, but not everybody can use it in a way that makes it as effective as when Carpenter uses it.
Right. And it's stuff like, yeah, you're right. It's like internalizing what they're actually doing rather than going, I like this scene, and so I'm going to try and recreate this scene in my work. Like even stuff, I mean, this is a really out there comparison, but like even stuff like The Thing, I'm like, the fact that this is hopeless situation, and at the end, their main concern is just like, well, we can't let it leave. And obviously it's like a lot more bleak. It's not as cute as It Follows. But the fact that they kind of go, well, I guess we'll just keep it with us for as long as we possibly can. Like that's the best option here. There's no way out of this. We're not even going to try and like find a way out. We're just going to do our best to contain this thing for as long as possible. And that kind of ending, which again is unusual for a teen horror, is like, that feels even like influenced by that. Not being afraid to make it like kind of like, yeah, they're kind of fucked, but at least they have each other. Situation.
It's bleak until the very end. It really commits to the bleakness.
Yeah.
And actually, I wanted to ask you, do you think there is a way out?
I think there probably is, but I don't think they have the resources to know what that is. I think it would be a different film where it would entail finding out what this thing is, finding a way to kill it, finding out where it came from or where it started or some such like thing, or doing something that like somehow, when you like not break the rules, but like where you do something, so it's like a catch-22 where they figure out a way of, well, if we do this, then it won't know what to do. And so it will kind of be like in a state of what the fuck am I trying to say? Where it can't do anything because it's kind of stuck in a position that we kept it in somehow. Like, I'm actually another random reference. It reminds me of like the Lich. I don't know if anyone watches Adventure Time, but like the Lich in Adventure Time, where there's a point where they trap it in this space where it can't make it. Its one goal is to cause death. And they trap it in a space where it doesn't have that option. So therefore it's just stuck in a point of stasis because it can't do what its primary function is to do. So I feel like there's probably like a loophole like that or something like that. But honestly, it feels like none of my business. Like, I'm just like, I don't know what that is. No one, how would you even begin to find that out? Like,
what I kind of really love is that there is no Donald Pleasance figure in this. There is no all-knowing person who is like, this is how you defeat it. This is how you stop it. Like, there is no such figure. There are literally, we spoke a little bit about the adults, but what feels so original about this film is the fact that there is no one who is helping them.
Right.
The most they get is from Hugh, the first guy that passes on it to Jay. And he tells her the rules, and that's it. He's like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Sods. But there is no one who comes in. It's like, I know how to get rid of it.
Right.
These are the rules. This is the ancient history of it. Like, no,
or
they're trying to figure it out.
From. Even from beyond the person before them who gave it to them, they don't know. Like, it's so vague. And, the parents, the adults throughout this whole thing, like, they're not really, like, I think the most of an adult we see is, like, Greg's mum, probably.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's more so we see her face, that when it is her, we know it's her. But, we see Hugh's mum briefly. That's very brief. But there's one shot where we see Jay and her sister's mum, and they're all hanging out on the couch. It's like she's not even there, and she's in the background at the table drinking wine. Mm-hmm. And it's like she is not even part of the scene. Even though she's there, she's close enough to hear everything that's being said. And they're not talking about anything specific, but she is just not engaged. She's just not part of these other people who are like living in her living room, who are like hanging out and like alive and young and whatever. She's just there drinking. And there's something about a daytime mum drinking wine, like by herself at the kitchen table, like looking at nothing, that is just speaks to a very specific idea of who this woman is. And we know vaguely, like, there's a picture of Jay's dad on her mirror.
Yes, who then takes the shape of it when they're in the pool.
Which is obviously quite traumatizing. Again, we don't have much information about why. I mean, apart from he's dead, we don't, like, there's stuff about his death clearly that's traumatized this family. Greg's mum, when Jay's first dumped off by Hugh and there's police around the house, Greg's mum is like, oh, that family's a mess. And it's hinted at that it's because, like, since the dad's died, I don't know what's happened, but this family's kind of fallen apart or are struggling or just have really struggled with this loss. And clearly the mum has completely taken herself out of the of the equation, like, because of this. So adults just are these figures who are just there, but not there to really provide any, even stuff like the registrar who, like, shows them the yearbook at Hugh's school. We never see her face. And the only adult faces we really see clearly as, like, a person we're, like, focusing on are when it's an adult, is when something that follow you happens to be an adult person, which is, again, really interesting. Like, the cops, they don't show any of their faces. The bit where Jay's talking to the policeman, Jay's sitting on a step and you can see the cop's leg, and the cop voice is, like, hovering, like, above her somewhere, but you never see their face. Even in the hospital, you don't see any doctors. There's one nurse that walks past briefly, and I'm like, adults have been raised in a very specific way where it's not like they're just not around. They're just not paying attention. They are just not engaged. They're too focused on other things to pay attention to these teens and what they're doing. The fact that they're gone for several days and come back and they're injured and all, like, the fact that Jay gets into a car wreck when her mum doesn't even know she's gone anywhere and has broken her arm. The fact that, like, child services haven't been called. Like, no one is really paying, like, one of the girls gets shot by accident. Again, no one seems to be, the police aren't involved. No one seems concerned. It just seems like they just deal with things that happen to the teens as they come, but no one's really asking the questions about why this is happening, what's going on. And yeah, it is that thing of, like, that, like, hopeless. They are just really, alone. They are just really in this with each other and for themselves, which also explains why it passes on the way it does. Because if this is how all the teens it's passing on to, how it happens, it's like they're always, I mean, the fact that Hugh was clearly renting a house and, like, I guess moved out of home for a little while this is happening to him, and then went back home. It's like, does your mom have questions about that? He's obviously also a more jumpy, paranoid person now. Like, your son has changed. Do you have questions about that? Like, it just feels like it feels very clever how I feel like the disconnect that teens often would feel with their parents or adult figures that have forgotten what it's like to be a teen, and how sometimes not seriously their lives are taken or seriously their concerns are taken. Because initially Jay tells the police and presumably her mum what Hugh told her, and her mum has no more questions about it. when Jay's holed up on her room, it's her sister's trying to get her out. Her sister's bringing her food. Like, her mom has, like, checked out.
I think that's what kind of makes it so effective emotionally. Like, it's not articulated explicitly in the film, but it's there in directorial choices and character choices and the way that things are framed, as you've described. And those are the things that then, like, unless you talk about it specifically, you don't notice them necessarily. They're not super obvious. There's not like a character saying, oh, my mom doesn't pay attention to us. No, you just see it. You just see it in what's unfolding. And then that's the bit that then sticks.
Yeah.
And they're kind of really foregoing this, you know, the I guess, traditional over-explanation that happens sometimes in horror films, specifically in teenage films, where there's like, you know, they all arrange themselves in a little Scooby-Doo gang and then they figure things out and then explain them to us, the audience. And they have to have a whole like, no, mom, you don't get us situation. This is very serious. It's like, no, they're just getting on with shit and no one is paying attention to them. Exactly like you said. And that is it's so isolating and lonely. So I think like one of the things that really resonates of this film is it doesn't drill down the fact that they're by themselves. It just shows us.
And I think it's one of those, I hate like too much exposition in a horror film. So this film is like perfect for that, where they drop us in and we learn who they are just through the scenes we're seeing. There's no point. We know some of their history, but it feels like natural conversations. It doesn't feel like exposition-y. There's no big talk. Even when they're playing at the pool, we don't see the discussion that happens about it. And I love that. It's like, we are like, oh, they have a plan. We don't know what it is. I guess we'll find out. Like, I love that he pulls it
because there's no need to show us the plan twice.
Right, exactly. We're going to see the plan in action. We don't need to hear them discuss it. And I really enjoy when we're dropped in on a group of people at a moment in time and we don't need... No one's trying to fill in backstory. Even the beginning girl, how vague that beginning is. It's like, I don't know what the fuck's going on. Like, it's so good. Because at that point, they don't show us it. We are not seeing anything. So I'm just like, this is such a good setup for this. And all this, like...
We don't even know why the hell she's wearing heels when she's running out of the house in the middle of the night.
No.
Why are you wearing heels, girl?
Why are you wearing heels? Why are you wearing at night? Like, did it just happen? Did it, like, I don't know. Like, there's all this kind of stuff that, like, is very confusing. And, like, they don't feel the need to say, like, about anything. They're like, no, you're learning this part of the story. And that's all you need to know. And you're at these people in this part of their lives. You don't need to know anything else about their lives. And I think it's really clever because I think one of the biggest mistakes horror films do, especially newer horror films, is they over-explain things. And I was like, it just takes away from something. And I just don't want too much explanation. But also all these things, like even my view of the sex in the film, even noticing the mother and stuff in the dad's picture, all of this, this is a film that keeps on giving. I've only there were things I noticed when I watched it this morning that I hadn't noticed before. Do you know what I mean? Like it's one of those films that just really does well with repeat viewing. Is really worth repeat viewing because there are things you notice and your opinions. Like when I first watched it, I think I was like, of the same mind, like, oh, it's a sexual STD. Like that's what it is. And only through repeated viewings have I been like, oh, this is like different actually. And these sex scenes have been made very specific for a reason. And, and I even I don't think I noticed the mum in the background of that first scene on the first couple of viewings. I don't think I noticed a picture of the dad in the first couple of viewings. I don't think I noticed that some of the people who are it show up in other scenes kind of in the as background artists as their actual person selves. So they're vaguely people she recognizes or used to seeing as well, which is fascinating. Like, and all the decisions were made so like strategically and it's so clever that it takes you a while to even, you're like, oh God, oh yeah, this and this and this. And I think it's just done. And there's so much to obsess about. Like even the fact that the Shell e-reader her friend has became this massive thing.
Yes!
And it doesn't even exist. But like everyone was like, wait, what is it? How do we get this?
That she like reads Wikipedia on?
Yeah, but she's reading Dostoevsky. Like And it's just like...
That is such a Juno moment as well, where you're like...
like everyone's like, where do you... And it's like, oh, they just made it as a prop. But it's like, stylistically, the choices were so specific. And it's so nice when someone cares this much about their film that they've made this specific... They wanted this specific, weird, random prop that everyone has got weirdly obsessed with. Like, I noticed it the first time I watched it this morning, she's wearing a shell choker when she goes, like, where did she even get that? Like, all the choices are so specific, and I'm just really obsessed with it, because I'm like, I don't even know what this is. Like, where would you get that? Like, it's amazing. I love it. But, like, what?
I think those are the things that make it feel weirdly out of time.
Yeah.
Like, we know the place. It's definitely the United States. It's definitely Detroit. It's definitely Michigan. But, like, time-wise, I'm like, I don't know. Like, they could be in the 80s. They could be in the 2010s. Yeah. I don't really know where these teams are.
What
like,
shop did you buy the shell choker from? Where is this shell e-reader from? Like, it's just, it's just very clever and just very specific. And as far as, like, I don't think there's a way out of it, but it does go by human rules. Like we were saying, it can't, like, just walk through a door. Like, if a door's locked, it has to, like, break it down. It has to smash a window. So I feel like I would have tried to trap it in, like, somewhere where it can't get out of. Like, if you trap it in, like, I don't know where I'd find a steel room, but if I could find one.
Like,
with, like,
trap it in concrete, like Russell Edgington?
Yeah, or, like, maybe not even that, like, even just a room that has no other has one door, no windows, that's made of, like, metal and has, like, a vault door on it. It's like, what would it do? Like, I'm sure it would still be trying to get out, but, like, I mean, how long would it take a person to, like, get through metal? Like, how long are you wearing? That's at least, like, I mean, maybe a couple of 100 years, you know? Like, that everyone's safe. So, like, that would be, again, I don't know where I'm sourcing this metal room with a vault door that I can trust that no one's ever going to open. Don't know where I'm getting that, but, like, if I could source one, if there was a bank vault just lying around, like, I had access to, I guess if I was rich, it'd be easier.
I mean, you could convince, like, you could sleep with a banker and convince them to just let you trap it in the vault.
I guess you'd have to also have a clever way of, like, getting it, because it's not dumb, right? So you'd have to, like, somehow trick it into following you in there, and then you have a way out, but it doesn't. Yeah, like, I don't know. There's a lot of planning involved. Maybe that's optimistic of me that I could even do this. But that would be my plan. That's what I would do. I'd just call my, like, vault guy, and I'd have something made up, and I'd...
Your vault guy? You've got a vault guy?
You know, everyone has a vault guy. I'd be like, hey...
Everyone
What's the turnaround on this kind of room? Or, like, you know who's that guy who had the scary, like, murder hotel? Like, that kind of situation where it's just impossible for it to get out. Like, I'd source one of those places. What was his name?
H.H. Holmes.
Yeah, that's it. I'd source an H.H. Holmes, like, vibey hotel. I'd find that somewhere. I'd be like, you know,
but also you'd have to, like, make sure that the H.H. Holmes style guy doesn't kill you first before you could actually...
I'd have to, like, have an inn where we were, like, on good terms. Or, like, I've got someone that will be here forever, like, here for you to torture forever. It's a thing that you can torture always.
Yeah, have, like, a murder bond.
Yeah. Some situation like that. Again, I don't know how.
I mean, that's...
It's not fully worked out, Black.
That's something to develop for the sequel. I mean, they've been kind of speaking about making a sequel for a little bit. Although I really don't want them to. I know it's probably going to happen in, like, 10 years.
I kind of don't want one. Yeah.
I don't want one. I'm good. I think this is perfectly formed as it is, and the ending works.
And people always do that when a film's successful. It's like, yeah, but because it's perfect and it's, like, little, it doesn't need yes, it's done really well, and let's leave it at that. Like, let that director make other films. Let's not try and capitalize on this one good film he did. Let him do other good things.
So
yeah, but, you know, I don't know why these little Detroit teens didn't think of a vault, but, you know,
hey, they're teenagers. I don't know. They're, you know, all teenagers.
I don't know why they didn't just, like, source a vault somewhere and do this. My plan. Next time.
And So to kind of start wrapping up our conversation about It Follows, what do you think has been its impact?
I think what it's done is made people strive to make films that are smarter when it comes to horror. As far as, not smarter like, oh, you have to be like a fucking genius to watch it. Smarter in the sense of like, oh, the lore is smarter. What's happening? What's scary about this is not just, here's a ghost. Like, oh, it's more intricate than that. Mm-hmm. And without plot holes or without, like, I think it's made people, I don't know if many people have been successful necessarily, like, especially when it comes to teen horror, newer teen horror. I think, and also the thing where it's like, it's based in very human, real emotion rather than heightened emotion. Mm-hmm. I think that's also, I've seen things strive for. They try to connect with you on a human level. Again, I'm not sure everyone's achieved it, but there's been an attempt, at least, to have you interact with it on that level, on a human level first, which I think is a good thing. I think is a good thing to have as a goal or to have in your mind when you're making something like a horror. And there's films that, like, I mean, it's not a teen horror, but have you seen, I don't know when it came out, actually. It might have come out. When did it come out? The Humans? When did that come out? Films like that, which is like an emotional haunting, and the whole time you feel unsettled. It's so fucking smart.
That's last year. That came out last year.
And I'm like, when did it come out? Last year. It's so clever, and it's somehow terrifying without anything. Like, if nothing happens, that's terrifying. But the whole time I was like, oh, like, I was like, had like a pit in my stomach. And I was like, it's made people look at what actually haunts people. Look at what actually really scares people. And I feel like, I mean, I have to like put the caveat in. I feel like more Western horror, like American and British horror films have now been trying to do that and be smart about the point of view and be smart about what the scary thing is and why it's scary and psychologically how that works and how it stays with you. Because I feel like I think Korean horror films have been doing it for a long time. I think Japanese horror films have been doing that for a long time. I think French horror, I think there's a lot of other countries that have latched onto that or figured that out like a long time ago. And I think at some points, like, films that we're like in England and America have found it occasionally, but then not been able to continually do it in the same way, because a lot of the time what happens, like we were just saying about It Follows and want to make a sequel, they go, oh, this is good, and then they kind of take away the reason it was good to make a sequel. Mm-hmm. And then everything becomes like the sequels and everything kind of gets lost in this melee of like recreation or taking scenes from films they like and going, oh, I want to do something like that. And it's like, but you've just lifted things from this other thing rather than like really try to find the essence of it. So I feel like it kind of pivoted into a way of realizing that people want to engage with that kind of film, because I think on paper It Follows wouldn't necessarily have been as popular as it was, and people like truly love it. And I think it was a surprise. I think when something comes out as a surprise like that, people are always like, how do we recreate? And I think it still takes a little while for them to be successful in actually hitting the nail on the head on why that was good. And like all the films we were discussing, like The Babadook, Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, Let the Right One In, again, people have kind of, they've gone, oh, that's good. And like, we'll let the right one in. They were like, let's make an American version. It's like, no, that's not what you do with this new information, this new good thing. Like, make something new. Like, let that inspire you to make something else. So I think it's still finding its feet, but I think it did, it was part of that like group of films that made people go, oh, it can be smart and it can be about very human things, even if it's supernatural. It can have like very human things at the basis of it, at the crux of it. And I think that's kind of where it's pivoted to for like, you know, more indie horrors anyway. I think that's often where they're trying to start from. Yeah.
I mean, thank you so much for
Thank you.
a half hour of your time, an hour and a half of your time and your insights into It Follows. It's always a pleasure. And where can people find more of your work online?
You can follow me on Twitter at Isara_BB. And I got it this time.
Yeah.
And you can follow me on Instagram at Isarasaurus, where I post, anything I'm doing that's coming up will be in there.
And you can be seen on BBC
it can be seen on BBC iPlayer in Toast of Tinseltown, being a creepy Manson-esque girl, called Snorky. Really fun, really, really normal name, really fun times. And there'll be more stuff. I'll post, you'll see on my Twitter and stuff. There's stuff coming out this year. None of it horror, unfortunately.
God damn it.
But there's stuff coming out this year that you'll see me pop up in. I know, no horror. What a travesty. But I'll be about. I'll be hanging around.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I love it as always.